I do believe that we all have a power that is within us and around us that, and we all have a purpose for it, right? There's a purpose for every single one of us on the planet. And it's our job to really discover that and to get out of everything out of the way that is sort of keeping us from becoming and attuning and embodying that state of what I call wealth and prosperity. So I am trained. I've been in the coaching industry for about 13 years. I've been in the healing arts industry for about 25. And in 2018, I found somatic therapy. And my story is a definite rags to riches story. I got my girl here today. I have my son at home, but it's been the three of us since they were only 1 and 2 years old. And so we really we've been through it, huh? A little bit. We've had some crazy experiences from, poverty and food stamps to, at the very worst was homelessness. And we've overcome, right? And the only reason we've overcome is through our deep faith and knowing that, right, everything happens for us. So I don't know if there's any Napoleon Hill fans in here, but Napoleon Hill has a quote, and the quote is, opportunity comes in the form of misfortune or temporary defeat. And for a really long time, I didn't understand what that meant. And I was sleeping on my massage table sleeping on my massage table in our bout of homelessness that summer. And I thought, I must be missing something. There's got to be some opportunity within this pain. There's got to be some opportunity in this. What is it? And I had done I also was raised Catholic. I've always had a lot of faith. And I thought, how is it that, what am I missing here, right? What am I missing? And I had done lots of healing work, right? I would say I'll be 50 in April. And I think the first almost 50 years of my life were all about trying to fix myself, really being in this core wound of unworthiness and shame. And shame is this idea that, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get it right? Why can't I figure it out? And when I had my children and it was just the three of us, I remember I've had this very clear decision of this ends with me, right? This idea that this ends with me. And it wasn't just I didn't have any money, right? Because money provides choices and opportunities, right? And so it was really this idea of, how is the emotional debt that I'm carrying going to be transferred to the next generation if I don't stand up and become a leader for what I require and what I desire? And that brings me to really the meat of what we're going to talk about today. So through my somatic training, what I've understood is that we all have a nervous system, right? And we've all had trauma, right? Every single one of us has experienced trauma. I don't think you can have a human experience without experiencing some level of trauma and loss and betrayal and hurt. And, I think that when we're raised to wear a social mask of I've got it all together, right? And we do, right? That we've got it all together and that we can't be hurt, right? And we shut down that vulnerability. And you said it so many times, this heart space. We tend to disconnect ourselves right here. It all disconnects right here. And we go into the head and we start thinking and figuring and strategizing and trying to understand. And that keeps us really safe for a really long time. But eventually, we might experience things like burnout, exhaustion, depletion. Maybe you have a nervous breakdown, right? Confusion. Why am I here? What is the point of all this? because we have been trained in the system, patterned in our childhoods for production and protection. And we are either in protection or in connection. As humans, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, but we are having a human experience. And as humans, we are born for three things. We are born wired for three things: safety, connection, and belonging. What's really fascinating is that being able to hold and expand our capacity for pleasure, right, becomes less and less as we grow older, right? As a child, we have all this expansion, we have all this ability to hold, right, pleasure and fun and joy. But that softness and that safety and that space of rest that we can find within us becomes decreased as we get older, as we've experienced traumas, as we experience loss and heartache. So it is a practice, right? It is a practice of attuning ourselves going in first, right? Because this idea of manifesting is twofold. Most of us know it as, let me attract the thing. Let me be a magnet to attract the thing, which immediately says that thing that we want, right, is separate of us. It's outside of us. And, I just got chills. Here we go. We turned it in, we tuned in, right? So it's a practice really of attuning to the thing we desire first within our bodies. And in order to do that, we need to connect to the feeling of the thing, right? So it is really about tuning from self-abandonment, right? Leaving ourselves, cutting ourselves off for safety, to tapping back into self-trust and coming back into self-loyalty. And then turning this into, right, a practice of self-loyalty. So the word that I picked up a lot on this morning was this idea of space, right? This space and our space and taking up space and the feeling of space. Well, you have space in your body, right? This is our vessel. And this idea that our inherent worth does not come from production, but from connection. And where can we find more capacity to hold space in our bodies? So this idea of contraction, right? I think we started off with this idea of how do we create more space if it's not safe to create more space for pleasure, right? Because we're always looking for the other shoe to drop. We're always waiting for the next thing. We're always scanning our environment. We're always making sure, are we safe, right? Is it safe to connect? Is it safe to be here? Is it safe for me to be up here, right? Where is the safety? And we're always looking for the space of safety. And so what happens is there's this idea of we're constricted and we're contracted. And when we are constricted and contracted, typically what's happening is, right, we minimize our space. There is no space. And actually, right, there's nothing wrong with any of us. We are whole and complete as we are. And we might want to transform, change our form of how we are organized within our own systems so we have more space to feel safe, to be able to receive. Because in this restful space is where we actually have the ability to receive, whether that's receiving a download, whether that's receiving a manifestation, whether that's receiving more money or love or connection, right? It is only within creating more space that allows us to do that. So this constriction, right? I believe that sometimes this constriction, and I think we hear a lot about release it, let it go, just get rid of it, just think of the positive stuff, right? And that doesn't work when we've experienced trauma. It is very hard to focus on the thought, right? In order to hold it, right? And really activate a feeling within us so that way we can spark, right, the thing that we want to come to us. And that sounds exhausting. Does it not sound exhausting? That's exhausting. So what we want to do is rest actually helps us wake up. When we rest, now we start to attune and we could actually start to wake up. When we understand that, someone said something about time. I think it was Annette. Annette could have done this whole thing for me. There is no urgency. You are enough now, and there is no perfection, right? And when we are in contraction, instead of trying to get out of contraction, right? What if we gave ourselves space to just be with what is? Be with the hard emotion, be with the grief, be with the constriction and the contraction. Because from there, we actually can expand our capacity to hold the discomfort, to hold the constriction, to hold the hard emotions, and then we will naturally expand. And when we naturally expand to this place of feeling safe, now we can receive, and that is how we transform and rewire. Okay, so to expand into rest is to create safety in our pleasure, right? So to be able to rest and not be on guard and not wait for the next thing and not worry about what's coming at you and not having to overthink it and not having to be hypervigilant around it, we can truly be in a space where we can attune to, it is safe for me to rest and be and not do. So pleasure, right, can be a threat to a nervous system that has wired itself for safety. Okay, so pleasure can be a threat to a nervous system that has wired itself for safety. Right? And so our liberation, right? We all want freedom, right? I want freedom. I want to be more free, right? And I want to make my own rules. I'm a little bit of a rebel. Liberation, liberation to oneself, right, is not about what you do, but how you do it, right? So how do we take and where can we find the rest within our bodies and then take that when we're going to work, when we're driving, when we are doing the things that we are required to do as humans, right? Where do we find the liberation? And what happens is when we abandon ourselves, we actually approach everything as really hard, and it's on our shoulders and it's our responsibility. And if you're finding yourself saying things like, I should, and I need to, and I have to, and it's my responsibility, it's my job, and I have to do it like this, right? What we're doing is we're cutting ourselves off from what we choose, because we have way more choice than we care to admit to ourselves. And this idea of what we want is for our pleasure, but what we're willing to do is for other people's pleasure, right? Within our limits. And so being able to understand for yourself what that requires and what you desire, right? And being able to be in that creates an ability to be able to hold what we get really excited about, our pleasure, our want, and the constriction, or the idea of being able to say, what am I willing to do? And how can I approach this? In what way can my system be at rest while I'm moving in this way? You can trust yourself, right? And you can trust the deliciousness that is within your body to be able to rest. Even if when we start, it's a pinky finger, right? Even if we start and it's like a very small part of you, because the more you tap into your body, the more you're going to understand where you're constricted, where you're contracted, and where there's contraction, there can be no movement. And where there's no movement, no healing can occur, because we need space in order to create transformation. And transformation is not about fixing you, it's about changing form within you. So expanding into rest is a lifelong practice. It is a practice in pleasure. It's a practice in connection to yourself. And it is a practice in finding safety within you and not needing someone else's safety to be your safety. Okay. So this idea of So you've all heard of the idea in nervous system work, fight, flight, fawn, freeze, right? Most people do socially, right? We've been socialized to fawn, right? If you're safe, then I'm safe. And so what if you listen to your body and listen to what your body was trying to tell you? Because the way the healing is allowing the movement. What if we could be in constriction to create just space for more silence and more stillness, to be belonging to ourselves before we take action to do anything or be anything for another? And how can you accept pleasure, joy, and liberation if you feel exhausted, depleted, or confused? Where can you create more space in your body and in your life so you have more access to movement internally and externally? It's time to slow down, which will actually speed things up. And where can you be more aware of what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to? What is your body attuning to?